My sister, 22F, is being manipulated or blackmailed by her troubling boyfriend, and I feel helpless. Why else would she stay with someone like Toby Pickford? Leave a like and subscribe right now. If you do, let me know in the comments below, and I'll reply to your comments saying thanks. Mom had been the one to tell me. We had been on the phone for nearly 40 minutes whilst I roamed up and down my small bedroom, packing away my things into a suitcase. My 3 years at university studying animation and computer design were over. I was set to be picked up by Mom the following morning. "Oh," said Mom, "your sister has a new boyfriend." This wasn't particularly hot news. Lee had lots of boyfriends all throughout secondary school. "You remember Toby, don't you?" Mom said. "No," I said, honestly. It had been years since I had last seen him, and I hadn't thought about what had happened on my 16th birthday. Perhaps it was harder to remember Toby because I hadn't told anyone about what I had caught him doing that day. "Toby Pickford?" I said. "Yeah," said Mum. "Toby who was at my birthday party years back?" I said. "Yes," said Mum. "Don't you remember inviting him?" I did remember. Toby was a year younger than me, and I had known him back when I was a member of the Maywell Scouts. Back then, I had seen a lot of Toby but had never gotten to know him much on a personal level. He had been energetic but also shy, very introverted. I could vividly remember all us little scouts dressed in our gray uniforms with the red scarves around our necks. One of the scout leaders would fill up plastic cups with diluted orange juice, and then we would each receive a biscuit. Toby liked to dip his biscuit into the juice. It was those memories of knowing Toby from Scouts which had prompted me to invite him to my 16th birthday party. A handful of my close friends were going, as well as some relatives. Although it was my 16th, I wasn't interested in making it into something big. I had been on my way home from school walking down Hallworth Road when I spotted Toby waiting for the bus. He looked lonely, standing on his own, not talking with anyone. Whenever I saw him in school, he was always alone, or at the fringe of groups. Anyone could tell he was very shy, and the type that had difficulty making friends. I had stopped to get myself a bag of chips from the nearby chip shop. Without thinking too much about it, I had gone over to Toby and started a conversation with him. "Chip?" I had said to him. He looked at me as if very confused for a second, and then he accepted the chip. "How have you been?" I said. "Remember when we were in Scouts together?" "Yeah," said Toby, tentatively smiling whilst he chewed the chip and then picked another from the bag. "You know," he said, "I saw your drawing in the art building. The drawing of the samurai, it's amazing." "Thanks, man," I said. I was used to compliments over my drawings. I loved drawing manga-style art specifically, and found I had a talent for it. At 15 years of age, I could draw almost to the same technical level as the professional mangaka I admired. "I've started to draw manga myself," said Toby. Unprompted, though I didn't mind, Toby took off his rucksack, which looked big on him because he was quite small, even compared to me, and opened up a drawing pad. Toby's art was mediocre but showed promise. There were still plenty of circles with the usual crisscross lines drawn around them in an effort to create the head of the character he had drawn. The drawings. I had forgotten what Lee had mentioned to me once. She was in one of his classes once. She had sat behind him. Over the course of several weeks, Toby had seen to drawing pictures of Lee in a manga style. He showed them to her, and she politely acknowledged the drawings. Months later, Lee had made a Facebook post in which she made it clear she thought Toby was a pervert. The post itself was a picture of all different types of stick figure people. Each one showed a stick figure doing something like reading, or swimming, or singing, and so on. The idea was to tag your friends so they could be delighted by being tagged as the smart one, or the best friend. Lee had tagged Toby as the pervert. "Toby's a pervert? Really?" one of Lee's friends had posted. "Yeah," Lee had replied, but didn't elaborate. I had seen the post on Facebook and had asked Lee about why she thought Toby was a pervert, and she explained about the drawings. I had asked her if there was anything particularly perverted about the drawings themselves, and she said she just thought it was weird that he thought it was okay to draw her during class each week. If I had known this about Toby at the time, plus all the other odd but harmless-seeming things he had gotten up to in and outside of school, then I might have rethought inviting him to my birthday party. Toby looked at me with awe and bewilderment when I mentioned about my birthday party that was happening the next day, Saturday, and that he was welcome to come by if he wanted to. "Sure," he said eagerly. He then got on the bus and went home. The next day on my birthday, he turned up early and sat on the sofa whilst I opened my presents. Lee was there and had been shocked to see Toby was in our home. "What's he doing here?" she said to me when we were alone in the kitchen after I was done opening my presents. "Who? Toby?" I said. "Yeah," said Lee. "He's so weird." "Nah," I said. "He's just shy." Lee rolled her eyes. Lee was the complete opposite to Toby in a lot of ways. Naturally very pretty, outgoing queen bee of her friendship group. I returned to the party and spent a few hours hanging out with my friends. We shared a 6-pack of beers out in the back garden, whilst my parents and other relatives stayed in the living room. Lee stayed with Mom and Dad in the living room because, although she didn't dislike my friends, They were all a bunch of weebs like myself, and she just didn't have any common interest to talk to them about. It was around 5 p.m. when I noticed I hadn't seen Toby in a while. He was easy to overlook, so I glanced around the back garden and through what I could see in the house, but I couldn't spot him. Casually, I got up and decided to see how he was doing. I ventured through the house to the living room. He wasn't among my relatives either. Maybe he was using the bathroom? I waited around for 10 minutes chatting with my relatives and then decided it had been long enough to go upstairs to check on Toby. I didn't know if he actually was upstairs. For all I knew, he might have gone home without telling anyone. I walked down the hall, and for a moment I wondered if he was doing something creepy in my sister's room. I walked casually to the first room on the first floor of the house, my sister's room. I peered inside and found the room was empty. Had I really expected to find Toby in there doing something weird? I had probably just let Lee's misguided opinion about Toby play in my mind too much. Josh had mentioned he wanted to borrow a CD of mine, an Iron Maiden album. So I decided to go grab it since I had come all the way upstairs and would likely forget if I didn't grab it there and then. I went into my room, whistling to myself, and that's when I caught Toby in the act. He was kneeling next to my underwear drawer and had one of my socks in his hand pressed against his nose. He was taking a big sniff of my socks. His other hand rested on the open drawer. Toby opened his eyes and looked at me in horror. He dropped the sock, stood up, and went almost as red as a tomato. "What are you doing?" I said. My words were tinged with bewilderment as well as anger. "I'm sorry," Toby said. I could see he was utterly mortified by what I had caught him doing. "I wasn't," he began, as if attempting to explain why he had been taking a big old sniff of my sock. He seemed to give up before he could try for an explanation. He rushed out of the room like a frightened mouse. Strangely, he didn't leave my house for another hour. He stayed whilst everyone sang happy birthday. I tried to pretend like he wasn't there. After the cake was cut and everyone was handed their slice on a paper plate, I noticed Toby slipping out the front door. I had seen him more or less every day at school here and there after that incident. I had even spoken to him a few times. He had tried to show me more of his drawings, but I kept the conversations with him short and didn't stick around to give him hope of us hanging out again. I had been tempted to tell at least one person about what I had caught Toby doing in my room, but somehow I just never got round to it. In a way, I felt bad for Toby, who was already getting tagged in Facebook posts for being a pervert. Me spreading a truthful rumor about him sniffing my socks would be the final nail in the coffin to any kind of social life he had. What's more, I didn't much like the idea of being associated forever as the guy who had his socks sniffed. I hadn't been close friends with him before, so it wasn't a big deal pretending like he didn't exist after the incident. "Could you send me a picture?" I asked Mom while still on the phone. She had to go, but she sent me the requested pic a few minutes later. The picture showed Lee sat beside Toby on the sofa. They were holding hands, but had a hand's width of distance between them. Lee had her usual duck face style pose on for the photo, and Toby smiled sheepishly. The thing was, Toby hadn't undergone a major transformation. He was just older, taller, still had his baby face, and the same shy demeanor. The more I tried to picture Lee and Toby as an item, the more confused I felt. It was only the pure logic that I might not be able to understand what made their budding relationship work, or at the very least have potential, that prevented me from taking any kind of action, like calling up Lee and asking her what the heck she was thinking, dating Toby of all people. Mom arrived at 11 a.m. to pick me up. As her little white car eased to a stop, I noticed Lee was sitting in the passenger seat. She was smiling and waving at me as I neared the car with my luggage. Mom got out of the car and helped me pack my stuff into the boot and the remainder, things like pillows and the duvet, onto the back seat. When we were done, I gave one last look to the house I had stayed with my flatmates for 2 years. The first had been spent in a campus dorm room, and then we drove off. I sat in the back seat among all the stuff I was bringing home with me whilst Lee, ever the thoughtful sister, remained sat where she was in the passenger seat. I noticed she was dressed in a top that was more revealing than usual. Didn't Mom care Lee was dressing like this? I told myself that Lee was just making a particularly bad fashion choice, and to maybe bring it up with her later in a way that wasn't going to feel too confrontational. I managed all of 5 minutes after we set off before asking Lee about Toby. "Are you both really together?" I said. Lee shot Mom a look. "You told him," said Lee. "It just kind of happened," she said. "He's actually really kind of okay." "Okay," I said. "So, how did you even start talking?" "I'm not talking about this right now," said Lee. "I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy," I said, trying to be diplomatic, but, "Oh, I know he's a total weirdo," said Lee. "I know, but, he's also kind of cute, okay?" "So this isn't some kind of prank?" I said. "You're really dating Toby Pickford?" "Yes," said Lee, getting annoyed. "What's, your problem?" "No problem," I said. I didn't say any more on the matter for the rest of the hour car journey back home. That sense of dread I had eased up and completely went away by the time we reached the front door. I busied myself taking all of the things to my bedroom. Mom helped. She wouldn't leave me until she saw everything was unpacked. I ate dinner with Mom, Dad, and Lee, and everything seemed fine. I avoided mentioning Toby again, but it was Mom who brought him up. "When are you seeing Toby next?" said Mom. "Probably tomorrow." "Is it okay if he comes over?" said Lee. "Of course," said Mom. "Just remember to keep your door open, keep the lights on. You know the rules when boys are in the house." "Okay," said Lee, and she took her dirty plate into the kitchen with her. When I entered the kitchen, I saw Lee was standing at the sink staring out of the window. It was dark out, so the window was no more than a black veil. The soapy water in the sink had reached its limit and had started to overflow, spilling onto the tiled floor. "Lee," I said, to get her attention. She continued to stare at the window, remaining very still. "Lee!" I said again, louder the second time. She snapped out of her reverie and gave a eep of surprise at the overflowing water. She turned the tap off and shoved her hand down the sink, pulling the plug and letting most of the water drain. She then saw to mop up the water that had spilled on the floor. "What's going on with you? You've been acting really weird," she said. "I've been acting weird?" I said. "Don't you remember what you used to think about?" Lee raised her hand and said, "Hey, he's my boyfriend now. Can you stop trying to make a problem for us?" "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't know what more to say. I could tell if I pushed the issue any harder, it would upset Lee even more. It started to settle in that she might somehow, for some strange reason unbeknownst to me, actually have feelings for sock-sniffing Toby. I said, "I'm sorry," a second time, and then gave Lee a big hug. I went upstairs soon after and went to bed. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of Lee giggling downstairs. I made my way down to the dining room. Then I saw him, Toby, sat beside Lee at the dinner table. The immediate vibe I got from both of them sitting together was that they were genuinely enjoying each other's company. My brain had to adjust to seeing the older, slightly bigger and broader, but still mostly baby-faced and altogether average, Toby that was before me. "Hey," he said, looking in my direction for a moment, very casually, and then fixing his attention back to Lee. She was wearing the same tank top as yesterday and was sitting leaning against Toby. Toby had a look on his face, a kind of amazed wonder, as if he were even more surprised than me at the kind of treatment he was receiving from my sister. Toby drew himself back. "We shouldn't," he said. "We need to behave." "Oh, fine," said Lee, and she sat back in her seat. I didn't see much of either of them for the rest of the day. They stayed in Lee's room with the door open. I came and went from my bedroom to downstairs and back several times for different reasons, but most of all to keep an eye on what they were up to. Toby seemed awkward and sat on her bed. Lee moved around a lot, doing most of the talking. By this point, I'd had enough of trying to guess what was going on. Whatever it was didn't seem like that big a deal, so I went to my room and spent the day relaxing, reading manga, and doing some drawing. After drawing for an hour, listening to music, I decided to go make myself a cup of tea. It was as I made my way down the hall towards the stairs that I heard Lee and Toby having a heated discussion. "You're going to keep your mouth shut," said Lee, whispering what she was saying. "I'm not going to have you ruining this for me. Do you understand?" "Okay," said Toby meekly. "But what if they find out?" "They won't," said Lee. "Not if you act normal. The only problem here is you, so just be cool and I'll let you stay around. I don't have to be nice to you like this. You know that, right?" "Yeah," said Toby. "I'm sorry." "It's fine," said Lee. "Just do as I say from now on, okay?" Toby must have nodded that he was going to continue to do whatever it was Lee was asking him to do. It was strange hearing Lee speaking so intensely to Toby of all people. What exactly was she asking him to do? To not act strange? Or was there something else going on that demanded Toby swear himself to secrecy? I retraced my steps back to my bedroom door and closed the door hard. Toby stayed until 10 p.m. Lee had taken a shower and had just stepped out of the bathroom into the hallway when I stood in her way. "Hey," I said, "can we talk?" Lee nodded, hugging the towel around her tighter. "I heard what you said to Toby earlier," I said. Lee's eyes went wide as if I had just stabbed her in the stomach. "You did?" she said. I realized then that she thought I already knew what she and Toby were up to, what they were trying to keep a secret. I hadn't planned to do so, but I continued to talk to her as if their secret was known to me. "Why, Lee?" I said. "Just tell me why." "I didn't intend for it to happen," she said. "It just did. I'm trying to make the best out of the situation." A renewed sense of dread was taking hold of me. What was it that she and Toby were hiding that had her so distressed? I was close to finding out what it was. "What does Toby have to do with this?" I said. Lee's concerned expression changed, becoming stoic. "Nothing," she said. "Leave him out of this." Lee started to move away, but I grabbed her shoulder. "Ow," she whimpered. "You're hurting me." "I'll let you go if you tell me what's going on right now." Lee's eyes widened, and I could see how frightened she was. She put a hand to my cheek and forced a smile. "Everything is going to be okay," she said. "Trust me." "How can I trust you if you don't tell me what you're hiding?" Lee's lips firmed up. "There's nothing you or I or anyone else can do about this." It's better you don't know. Now please let me go. I didn't let go. I couldn't. I felt like grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her until she told me everything. I felt like a monster even holding her arm as tight as I was, but it was all I could do. It was a weak threat I hoped she didn't see through. "Let me go or I'll scream," she said. I didn't let go, and then Lee sucked in a big breath. I slapped my hand over her mouth and her eyes went wide. I felt her tongue tickle my palm and I let go of her mouth and her arm. Lee giggled and pranced back to her bedroom. Enough was enough. I had to talk to Mom and Dad about what was going on. If I couldn't get through to Lee, then maybe they could. I went downstairs and told Mom and Dad about all of my concerns, and I also told them about Toby sniffing my socks in my room on my birthday. Mom and Dad listened attentively and quickly shared the same level of concern as me. Dad shot up from the sofa. "What are you doing?" said Mom, standing up and hurrying to Dad's side, grabbing his wrist gently to stop him from thundering upstairs. "I'm going to find out what she's up to," said Dad. "None of this sounds right." I know, said Mom. "That boy clearly isn't good for her. But don't go up there shouting and demanding things. Please let me talk to her first, okay?" Dad looked to the stairs for a few moments before relaxing a little. "Okay," he said. "Talk to her tonight. If she starts messing you around, then I'll step in." I went to bed that night unable to sleep. At around 4 in the morning, I noticed a light coming from downstairs. I got up and crept my way to the stairs and made my way down as silently as possible, doing my best to avoid the steps I knew creaked. I spotted Mom and Lee sitting at the dinner table. They were whispering very quietly. "Maybe Dad will get through to you," Mom said, sounding as if she were at the end of her patience. "Don't," said Lee, whining. "There's nothing going on, I swear." "Stop lying to me," said Mom. "You think I can't tell how different you've been acting? It's Toby, isn't it? He's blackmailing you, isn't he?" "No," said Leigh, whining even more, on the verge of tears. "He isn't." "Then tell me," said Mom. "Tell me everything right now, or else I'll let Dad handle things his way." Lee shot up suddenly and slapped Mom's phone off the table. "Bitch," she said, and then Lee ran towards the stairs. She froze when she reached the first step, spotting me. She then renewed her effort to climb the stairs, passing me by. She hurried to her bedroom and shut the door behind her. Mom picked up her phone, placed it on the table, and then started to weep into her hands. I made my way down to her and gave Mom a hug. She was surprised to see me, but simply held me close. "I tried," she said. "She's not listening. Dad will have to sort her out." I stayed with Mom for another 10 minutes, and then we both went up to bed. I hated how things seemed to be getting worse, how Lee was passing by every opportunity to explain her situation so we could help. I thought World War III would start when Mom gave Dad the all-clear to go nuclear on Lee after last night. But nothing happened. Mom made breakfast, and Lee stayed in her room, and Dad went to work as usual. I wasn't eager to set off any dramas myself, more than I already had at least, so I decided to make plans to see my friends instead. I spent the whole day catching up with my friends who I had only seen here and there on visits back home from university. I didn't mention anything of what had been going on to them, but word of Lee dating Toby had gotten around. My friends were just as perplexed, and a little repulsed, at the idea of Toby and Lee being an item as I had been. I returned home just after dinner time and found Mom and Dad and Lee sat in the living room. Things felt far from normal because there was some tension in the air, but there wasn't any arguing or tears like I expected. After making some small talk with Mom and Dad, Lee just sat and watched TV with her closed fist resting against her temple. I took an opportunity to speak with Mom alone in the kitchen. "Did you tell Dad to step in?" I said. "No," said Mom. "I spoke with Lee some more about things, and there's nothing going on after all. She's just being a bratty teen." "Wait, what?" I said, confused. "She's clearly up to something with Toby. I heard them. I pretty much got a confession about it from her. I just don't know exactly what it is she's up to." Mom looked impatient all of a sudden. "She's in love," she said, "and you're being a protective big brother. I'm so proud of you for caring so much about your sister. But there's nothing the matter." I couldn't keep the disbelief from my face. Last night I had been so sure Mom was going to bring Dad into this, but now she was acting as if everything was okay. What had she found out from Lee to make her change her mind to this degree? "Mom, is it blackmail?" I said. "Does Toby have something over Lee?" "That's enough," said Mom, crossly, pointing a finger at me. "I'm telling you as your mother to drop this right now. No more. Do you hear me?" None of this made sense. None of it. I didn't know what to say or do, so I simply nodded. "Good boy," said Mom, and she cupped her hand to my cheek and caressed it, and then she embraced me in a hug. I felt numb and angry, and I knew I had only one option left, to tell Dad about my concerns. But with Mom changing her tune on Lee and Toby, I no longer felt as sure of myself that something was wrong. What if it was all in my mind and there really was no problem? What if I was the problem? It was a horrible feeling to not be able to trust my own intuition anymore. Is Mom right, or is my sister actually hiding something from me? Even worse, is Toby blackmailing her? Part 2 will uncover this mystery, so comment down below if you want to see it.